chilling fog descended upon the glamorous streets of 1920s. Lowe's angels hiding a sinister presence beneath the bright city lights. Beyond the fame and fortune of the silver screen rested an object of immense sorrow. This small metallic artifact carried a heavy curse that would soon shatter lives and spread an enduring nightmare across the entire entertainment industry. The legendary silent film actor Rudolph Valentino wandered into a dusty antique shop in San Francisco on a bleak afternoon. The air inside felt stagnant and tasted like rusted iron and old paper. Dim lamps cast long, eerie shadows against the walls as the famous star browsed through forgotten relics, seeking something unique to wear for his upcoming movie role. He noticed a heavy silver ring resting on a velvet cushion inside a cracked glass display case. The jewelry featured a pale, semi-precious stone that seemed to glow with a sickly yellow light. The strange artifact caught his eye, immediately pulling him closer with an unnatural magnetic force that made his heart race and his palms begin to sweat. The elderly shopkeeper approached with trembling hands and warned the handsome young actor to step away from the counter. The frail man whispered that the ring carried a terrible hex forged by dark magic, and warned that anyone who wore it would face an early grave. The old merchant begged the star to leave the tainted silver piece behind. Rudolph Valentino dismissed the terrifying warning as a mere fairy tale meant to frighten gullible tourists. He laughed off the frantic pleas of the old man and purchased the glowing ring without a second thought. As he slipped the cold silver band onto his finger, a sudden chill traveled up his arm and settled deep within his beating heart. Shortly after wearing the mysterious item on a film set, the celebrated actor began experiencing terrible headaches and vivid nightmares. He saw pale figures wandering through endless dark corridors in his sleep. His closest friends noticed a sudden change in his usually vibrant demeanor as he became unusually withdrawn and constantly stared into the dull yellow stone in silence. The shadow of the curse deepened when the movie titled The Young Raja debuted to disappointed crowds and harsh reviews. Fans completely rejected the film, marking the first massive failure of his incredible career. The actor felt a dreadful certainty that the cursed jewelry was responsible for this sudden misfortune. But he found himself completely unable to remove it. Friends pleaded with him to throw the wretched object into the ocean and free himself from its sinister grasp. Every time he tried to pull the silver band from his hand, an invisible weight seemed to press down on his chest. The yellow stone mocked him, with its faint glow acting like a parasite, feeding off his fading energy. The physical toll became impossible to ignore as the strong actor grew terribly weak and pale over the following months. He collapsed in his luxurious hotel room clutching his stomach in unimaginable agony, while the cursed silver gleamed on his trembling hand. Rushed to the hospital, he faded quickly, while doctors remained completely baffled by his sudden severe deterioration. At just 31 years old, the beloved idol took his final breath, leaving the entire world in absolute shock. Devastated fans flooded the streets of New York City mourning the sudden loss of their cinematic hero. Yet amidst the overwhelming grief, the sinister ring remained waiting patiently on his lifeless hand to claim its next unfortunate victim. Pola Negri, an elegant actress, and his deeply devoted lover inherited the wretched ring after his tragic passing. Desperate to keep a physical piece of her lost love close to her heart, she completely ignored the terrifying rumors surrounding the jewelry. She slipped the cold metal onto her delicate finger, unaware of the dark entity she had just awakened. Almost immediately, her once thriving career began to crumble into dust. Studios stopped calling, and her health rapidly declined as a mysterious illness drained her strength day by day. She suffered from terrible fevers and heard faint, agonizing whispers echoing through her empty bedroom every single night, until she finally realized the horrid truth about the antique ring. Terrified by her sudden downfall, the fading star handed the haunted object over to a young singer named Russ Columbo. She hoped the curse would somehow vanish if given away freely to someone completely disconnected from the past tragedies. However, the sinister force inside the pale stone only grew stronger and hungered for another innocent soul to consume. Russ Columbo was a rising talent with a beautiful voice and a promising future ahead of him. He wore the silver artifact, proudly believing it to be a lucky charm from a renowned Hollywood legend. For a brief moment, his fame skyrocketed, and he completely dismissed the dark warnings that accompanied the antique jewelry as foolish superstition. The illusion of luck shattered on a quiet afternoon when he visited his best friend in a modest studio apartment. His friend was showing off a collection of antique firearms that supposedly held no ammunition. In a freak accident, a forgotten bullet ricocheted off a desk and struck the young singer directly in his head, ending his life instantly. The tragic demise of the young musician cemented the horrific reputation of the silver artifact across the city. Whispers of the deadly hex spread through every glamorous party and exclusive club in town. People began to realize that the glowing yellow stone was not merely unlucky, but actively malevolent and deeply thirsty for human suffering and tragic endings. His grieving family gifted the dreadful artifact to his close friend Joe Casino, hoping to clear their home of its dark presence. Joe was a pragmatic man who completely rejected the idea of ghosts or supernatural curses. He placed the heavy silver piece inside a locked glass cabinet determined to prove that the terrible rumors were absolute nonsense. For many years, the artifact remained securely trapped behind glass, unable to inflict harm upon anyone. Joe watched his life proceed, normally feeling incredibly proud that he had seemingly defeated the infamous Hollywood hex. He eventually grew overconfident and foolishly decided it was completely safe to wear the notorious jewelry out in public to mock the superstitious crowds. He put the pale stone on his finger during a crisp autumn evening and went out for a casual drive. Less than a week later, a massive truck suddenly swerved across the road and crushed his small vehicle into a mangled heap of metal. Joe perished instantly at the scene, with the dull yellow stone shining amidst the wreckage. Following his brutal passing, his terrified brother Del Casino took possession of the cursed jewelry with trembling hands. He firmly believed in the sinister power of the object and absolutely refused to wear it under any circumstances. He placed it inside a secure wall safe, intending to keep the murderous artifact locked away from the world forever. Despite being sealed in complete darkness, the malicious energy of the yellow stone seemed to seep through the solid steel door. Dell reported hearing strange, scratching noises emanating from the safe during the dead of night. The heavy atmosphere in his home grew entirely suffocating as an unseen entity paced back and forth across his hardwood floors constantly. The overwhelming fear finally drove him to lend the dreaded object to a brave collector named James Willis. James was fascinated by haunted relics and specifically requested the dangerous artifact for his bizarre private museum. He eagerly locked the silver ring inside a reinforced display box, convinced that he could safely contain its dark and ancient power. The supernatural force completely defied the thick glass and heavy locks. One evening, James found the display box totally shattered from the inside out, and the ring resting unharmed on the floor. A sudden stroke paralyzed him later that exact same night, leaving him trapped inside his own body, while the pale stone mocked him from the shadows. The terrifying artifact eventually found its way to a skeptical movie director who planned to use it as a prop in a scary film. He completely ignored the frantic warnings of his crew members and forced his leading actor to wear the tarnished silver band for a crucial scene. The atmosphere on set immediately turned icy and hostile. Lights exploded above the stage without any logical explanation, showering the terrified crew in sharp glass. The lead actor, wearing the cursed jewelry, collapsed to his knees, screaming that his skin was burning. When they finally managed to pry the ring off his trembling hand, a deep purple burn mark remained scorched permanently into his pale flesh. The production was canceled instantly as fear gripped everyone involved in the doomed project. The director locked the silver piece inside a heavy iron vault, hoping to completely forget the terrifying ordeal. However, the dark entity tethered to the jewelry was not finished spreading its misery, and soon the vault door was found, hanging wide open and empty. The cursed object resurfaced years later in the possession of an eccentric pawn shop owner in downtown Los Angeles. The man claimed the ring brought him incredible wealth, but his physical appearance rapidly deteriorated into that of a walking corpse. His eyes grew incredibly sunken, and his skin took on the exact sickly yellow hue of the stone. Customers completely avoided his gloomy shop, complaining of a terrible metallic stench that caused unbearable nausea. The owner became entirely obsessed with the silver band, constantly rubbing the pale stone while whispering to people who were not there. He ultimately vanished without a single trace, leaving behind only an empty store and the haunted jewelry resting on the counter. A curious young journalist named Arthur discovered the abandoned artifact while investigating local urban legends for a magazine article. He pocketed the heavy ring, intending to write a comprehensive expose debunking the legendary Hollywood curse. He completely failed to realize that his foolish action had just invited an ancient and extremely ruthless demon into his quiet life. Arthur began experiencing the exact same auditory hallucinations that had tortured previous owners many decades prior. He heard a chorus of weeping voices echoing from the drains in his apartment, and saw fleeting shadows darting across his mirrors. The air in his home became so incredibly cold that thick frost actually formed on his living room windows overnight. He attempted to photograph the silver ring for his upcoming article, but every single picture developed as a black void. His cameras malfunctioned repeatedly, and his recording equipment captured only the horrifying sounds of people gasping for air. The journalist realized with absolute dread that the stories of the lethal magic were completely real and terribly dangerous. Desperate to survive, Arthur drove out to a desolate canyon, determined to bury the awful object deep underground. As he dug a shallow hole in the dry dirt, a sudden violent tremor shook the earth beneath his boots. The ground split open slightly, and a thick black mist poured out, wrapping its freezing tendrils around his trembling ankles. A towering, shadowy figure emerged from the dark fog, standing silently between the terrified journalist and his vehicle. The entity possessed no facial features, but radiated an immense aura of pure hatred and bottomless sorrow. Arthur fell backward into the dirt, completely paralyzed by a supernatural terror that completely crushed his lungs and stopped his racing heart. The dark phantom pointed a long, decaying finger directly at the glowing yellow stone resting in the dirt. Arthur heard a booming voice in his mind, commanding him to return the stolen artifact to the shadows where it belonged. He squeezed his eyes shut and threw the cursed silver piece straight into the deepest part of the jagged fissure. The ground forcefully snapped shut, swallowing the horrid jewelry and severing its immediate connection to the mortal realm. The suffocating black mist dissolved instantly into the cool night air, leaving Arthur gasping alone in the quiet canyon. He scrambled back to his car and sped away, vowing to absolutely never speak of the terrifying entity ever again. Despite successfully escaping the immediate physical danger, the psychological trauma haunted the young journalist for the rest of his life. He could never shake the dreadful feeling that the cursed silver band was constantly calling out to him from beneath the earth. He lived his remaining years in total isolation, terrified of every single shadow that crossed his path. Rumors eventually began to circulate that the deep fissure in the canyon had mysteriously opened up again after heavy rainfall. Hikers reported seeing a faint yellow glow emanating from the dark cracks in the rocky terrain. Those who ventured too close complained of sudden severe migraines and a completely overwhelming feeling of depression that lasted for many long weeks. A team of paranormal investigators eventually journeyed into the rugged canyon, hoping to capture evidence of the legendary phantom. They brought heavy digging equipment and advanced supernatural detection devices to locate the buried treasure. Their audio monitors immediately picked up the unmistakable sounds of a massive crowd wailing in unspeakable agony from somewhere far below the solid bedrock. Before the team could even break ground, a sudden rockslide cascaded down the steep canyon walls, trapping them entirely. Huge boulders smashed their expensive equipment into useless metal fragments and blocked their only path back to civilization. They spent 3 terrifying nights huddled together, listening to the demonic voices, whispering cruel threats from the endless darkness surrounding them. When a rescue party finally located the trapped investigators, they found the group utterly delirious and completely covered in unexplained burns. The terrified survivors babbled incoherently about a pale yellow stone that burned like a miniature sun in the darkness. The rescue team quickly evacuated the canyon, leaving the disturbed earth untouched and completely abandoning the haunted location. The authorities permanently closed off the canyon to the public, citing unstable terrain and extreme danger to hikers. Barbed wire fences were erected around the perimeter, bearing strict warning signs that ordered all visitors to stay away. Yet thrill seekers completely ignored the warnings, drawn by the intoxicating promise of uncovering Hollywood's most infamous and deadly lost treasure. One ambitious teenager managed to bypass the heavy fences under the cover of a thick midnight fog, He carried a small metal detector and a shovel determined to retrieve the legendary artifact and achieve instant fame. The cold air burned his lungs as he approached the exact spot where the ground had swallowed the terrible relic years ago. His metal detector suddenly emitted a deafening shriek, causing him to drop the device in sheer panic. The machine sparked violently and burst into flames, melting the plastic casing into a puddle of toxic sludge. A sickly yellow light began to pulse from the dirt directly beneath his boots, illuminating the surrounding fog with an unnatural, eerie glow. He frantically dug into the loose soil with his bare hands, completely mesmerized by the hypnotic, pulsating light. His fingers brushed against cold metal, and he pulled the infamous silver band out from the earth. The moment he touched the tarnished artifact, a shadow detached itself from the canyon wall and rapidly glided toward his kneeling, vulnerable form. The phantom enveloped the screaming boy in a freezing shroud of absolute darkness, erasing his cries from the physical world. By the time morning arrived, there was absolutely no trace of the ambitious teenager remaining in the silent canyon. The only evidence of his presence was a single charred metal detector lying beside a perfectly undisturbed patch of dirt. The terrible legacy of Rudolph Valentino's doomed jewelry remains completely unbroken as it waits patiently in the dark. It is an ancient, hungry force that masquerades as an exotic trinket to lure the vain and the curious. The dark entity feeds exclusively on human misery, completely draining the life force of anyone foolish enough to desire its cursed beauty. Historians and occult experts continue to heavily debate the true origin of the malicious pale stone and its tarnished silver setting. Some claim it was forged in a forgotten tomb, while others believe it was cursed by a betrayed lover centuries ago. Whatever its true bloody history may be, the undeniable result is always a swift and tragic end. Those who walk the glamorous streets of modern Hollywood still occasionally report seeing a handsome phantom dressed in 1920s attire. He wanders aimlessly past the glittering modern theaters, constantly examining his bare hands with an expression of profound sorrow. The spirit of the great actor remains forever tethered to the tragic pain caused by the demonic artifact. As long as greed and vanity exist in the hearts of humanity, the sinister jewelry will always find a willing host. It rests quietly in the shadows, slowly gathering its malevolent energy until the perfect, unfortunate soul comes along. The vicious cycle of glamour and sudden death is destined to repeat itself continuously until the very end of time. So if you ever find yourself wandering through a dusty antique shop and spot a dull yellow stone shining in the gloom, walk away. Never underestimate the immense power of an ancient curse hiding behind a facade of beautiful silver. Some treasures are simply meant to stay buried, forever waiting silently in the dark, cold earth for eternity.